Welcome everyone to our latest Meet the Finalists webinar. I'm Will Chamberlain-Webber, Joint Managing Director of Chamberlain Dunn, who are the creators and organisers of the Advancing Healthcare Awards for allied health professionals, healthcare scientists, and for those who work alongside them. For the past 15 years, these UK-wide awards have highlighted the often overlooked contribution that these healthcare professionals make in the areas of prevention, diagnosis, treatment, recovery, and rehabilitation. And of course, by now we should have celebrated with our 2020 winners, but this has been postponed until next Friday, and like many others, turned into a virtual ceremony. So please join us then. And it certainly seems an age since the judging day way back in February. The gap has given us time to focus on our finalists and to invite them to tell us about their work, reflect on their experiences during COVID-19, and to share with us how their world now looks. The gap has also given us a chance to recognise and record the incredible work that healthcare scientists and AHPs have been doing over the past few months. Our esteemed gallery has over 200 nominations of individuals and teams who have risen to the COVID challenge, often moving into roles that are a very long way from their usual work. Before we start today, I'd also like to draw your attention to a spin-off publication from the 2020 awards, Making Health and Social Care Greener, which is a collection of green ideas submitted by many of our entrants in response to DEFRA's Year of Green Action. It also reveals the winners of the award, and you can download it for free from our website. Today we'll be hearing from the finalists in the Chroma Award for Excellence in Neurorehabilitation, sponsored by Chroma in association with the Independent Neurorehabilitation Providers Alliance, and we are delighted that Dan Thomas, Managing Director at Chroma, is our chair today and will introduce our speakers and lead the discussion. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Will. So as former category winners ourselves, Chroma sponsors this award to celebrate, encourage, and to challenge AHPs, including arts therapists, to create excellence in neurorehabilitation settings. In association with IMPA, the Independent Neurorehabilitation Providers Alliance, this award shortlists 3 very strong projects, all of which demonstrate excellence and have enabled patients to achieve enhanced rehabilitation outcomes. It therefore gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speakers, who are Jonathan Fever, Neurologic music therapist, and Mark Innerhofer, paediatric physiotherapist from the Portland Hospital, part of HCA Healthcare. Over to you, Jonathan and Mark.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Just to give a quick rundown, we are in the hospital currently, so we're wearing our masks, so please apologise. I'm apologising for that, and our scrubs. Hopefully you can understand me still through the mask as well as you can without. We are going to share our screen, so it will change for you too. Bear with me just one moment. Choose. Okay, and hopefully you can see our presentation beginning. So just to give you an overview of what we're hoping to share with you today, as Will was saying there a minute ago, we are planning to give you a bit of an overview of our project initially, run down what it was that we had been doing prior to the awards kind of work before. We're going to then talk a little bit about how our work has changed and also the impact of COVID-19. To you, Mark.
So to start with, what is SDR? So SDR stands for Selective Dorsal Rhizotomy, and it's a specialized neurosurgery that is undertaken on the spinal cord to help alleviate spasticity in children with spastic cerebral palsy. So after this surgery, the children are very weak, and it can take up to 6 months for them to return to their previous physical baseline. And so they need intensive physiotherapy following the surgery. So after they have the surgery, they receive 3 weeks of intensive physiotherapy. So that's 2 hours a day for 3 weeks, 1 week as an inpatient, and then 2 weeks as an outpatient. And so after that 3-week intensive block, they are further followed up by their community team for the next 6 months, where they also recommended to receive about 3 to 5 sessions a week. And after 6 months, we review them again to see where they're at and then make new recommendations. So this next slide sort of talks about the whole pathway of the SDR service. So it all starts with a joint assessment with the neurosurgeon, Mr. Aquilina, and us from the physiotherapy team. And during this assessment, we have a look at the child's past medical history, as well as how the child presents. And based off that assessment, we make a judgment if the child is suitable for surgery, or if we think other treatment options might be more beneficial. So we take into account not only the past medical history, but also how compliant these children are, because the intensive post-op physiotherapy can be quite demanding on children. So we have to make sure that the children are really suitable for this surgery and for this pathway. So once the decision has been made to go ahead with SDR surgery, they come to the Portland Hospital for a whole day of pre-op assessments, where we run through a series of outcome measures to get baseline measurements, so we can compare those then at the different reviews further down the line. So then after the surgery, they spend about one night in pediatric ICU, just to make sure that their pain relief is properly monitored. And then they spend another 5 nights on the ward. And so that's where the twice daily intensive physiotherapy starts. So during that first week and the 2 following weeks as an outpatient, so this is where the collaboration with John, the music therapist, starts, and where we kind of started to work together and really harness those benefits.
So I had a conversation with Claire, as you can see in the picture. She's there on the far left-hand side of your screens. She has now left the service and Mark has taken over. I should have mentioned that at the start. So we had a slight change in our team over here. And we talked a bit about what it was that might be supportive from music therapy within those 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of really intense therapy, and what we can do to really help out. So the issues identified were that children were weak because of the surgery themselves. They felt tired because they had such intensive interactions and such intensive therapeutic interventions. And they also felt quite frustrated because they were losing skill sets that they then had to relearn. So the benefits of already having music therapy in the neurorehabilitation team within the hospital was that we had an established relationship. We could jump in and we could just get started really on those collaborative working processes. And we kind of knew how to work together, but we hadn't worked together in such an intensive 2-week, short-term, really making gains and daily improvements as they do within the SDR program. So it seems really important to really focus on those relationships and help out to engage the child as much as possible. Let's move on to this next one. So what we were doing during that time, so using music therapy techniques to support that engagement, but also to support the movements in which the physio team are really trying to promote. So we're using things such as rhythm to help with, for example, if you see a picture on the right-hand side of your screen there, with a young man walking between the parallel bars, we were looking at helping him to step at the right time. So we're using the rhythm of music to do that. Melody, song story, and group facilitation. All of these things are really helpful in illustrating what we might be doing to the child. So we use the melody of raising melody, kind of going up in tone to really help the child stand up and really help to describe that to a child, because it can be quite difficult to put that into words sometimes, and for that to be fully understood. And also things like some stories to really get some motivating subject matters or motivating interactions that can then be used throughout different points of the rehabilitation too. Just going to move on to the next slide here.
So yeah, what we expected from this collaboration, so as John was saying, we've worked together on the Neurorehab pathway, and so we knew that music therapy really helps with our patients to engage with them better and to really help with that motivation. And once we started to work together on the SDR pathway, we got that positive feedback from the sessions as well as from the parents. What we didn't quite expect was that how well this collaboration helped to break through some of that frustration that John mentioned earlier. So if you think that these kids suddenly lose skills that they previously had, and they're going through this 3 week of intensive rehab, by sort of end of week 2, week 3, we expect a couple meltdowns, and compliance can really dip with that intensive rehabilitation. And so John stepping in really helps sort of overcome that frustration and helps keep that compliance up. And that was really then reflected by those motor developments that we then saw from that. So yeah, not only did we get a lot of motor developments, but we also noticed that it gave sort of us physiotherapists a bit of a break, because once John's leading the session, this gave us a chance to catch up with the parents. But it also kind of helped sort of change that therapist-parent-patient dynamic, and suddenly with John leading the session, we were all kind of on the sidelines, and we're all participants. And so it just changes the dynamic, which is really beneficial in such a sort of intense, during such an intense rehabilitation block. Mm. And then lastly, we also, we didn't expect that the kids would love these activities so much, and they would help so much with compliance. And so we definitely used some of these games that John introduced and kept following up on them in sessions that followed.
Definitely, it's really thinking of, from a music therapy perspective there, on those games and activities, was changing the roles that you guys are playing maybe within the sessions, rather than feeling as though the child is feeling directed by what you might be doing or interacting in the games. You're very good with that sort of thing usually anyway, but to introduce new things within which music, for example, is something that you can be all together on one level playing field, and that can be really helpful in engagement, and also helping that child feel empowered too in their own rehabilitation. So where to now? So what we'd hoped to do was to put together some sort of outcome measure to really review what we're doing, to really think about where these games really are. We've got plenty of subjective data and case examples of how we've got some movement forwards and real development and support, but we don't have a bespoke outcome measure. So that was something we were hoping to put together, and increasing that access and trying to time our access at those most difficult times. So when the child is really tired towards the end of the week, when they might really need an extra boost of support, to try and time the music therapy for that time. However, what happened was COVID-19.
Yeah, so as SDR falls under the category of an elective surgery, the SDR pathway got put on hold for quite a while. We only restarted the service in July, and with a couple changes. So of course, like everywhere in healthcare settings, we're gowning up, we're wearing gloves, we're wearing masks, so we have to ensure the proper PPE is provided. We can only have one parent present during the entire 3-week stay, so it is a bit of a big change, and it can be quite strenuous on the families as well. And so that's something, we have to deal with. Hydrotherapy was also kind of a fixture within week 2 and 3 of the pathway. It introduced a bit of a change to the routine, but also showed parents and families, some activities they could follow up in the community. But unfortunately, in the current environment, we had to cancel hydrotherapy just because, it was deemed, too much of a risk to continue at this point in time.
Yeah, for music therapy as a whole, because we are kind of an additional service within the hospital, it was withdrawn for a certain amount of time during the real peak in COVID-19 in general. But we're back on the hospital now, back on the hospital ground, working and using all of those measures that the rest of the team are. So it's been really helpful in a sense of being able to engage when those children are coming in and when they can start back working through their interventions and their development. There's a few things on this slide as well. We were wondering about building into the service. It's something that we're hoping to develop over the next maybe month or two, in a sense of using the telehealth structure. So how we can put together a bit more structured, facilitative games and also musical activities. And that was something, though, initially as we first came back as a music therapy service, we were working remotely. So that's something that impacted on the support we could give. But it's also something we can maybe think about going forward, is helping parents to then continue their care going into the future. And I think going forward there should be some more.
So there's so on the one hand, so the SDR service is also the SDR surgery is also available on the NHS. But because so much intensive physiotherapy is needed post-operatively, a lot of the planned SDR surgeries for the NHS aren't happening at the moment because the community follow-up can't be ensured, because a lot of the community physiotherapists aren't necessarily able to do sufficient face-to-face contact, and so they can't really provide those recommended post-op therapy sessions. And so a lot of the families that were on the NHS SDR pathway are on the waiting list, and they're struggling to secure sufficient post-op rehabilitation. And so because of this, we found had a lot more private inquiries for SDR surgery here. And so to hopefully help with some of that backlog that the NHS is dealing with. So that's definitely something that we've noticed, that a lot more families are voicing interest in going private with the surgery, because there is also like a time critical element to it.
I think that's the end of our presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing our screen.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan and Mark. I'm going to ask one of my own questions and then see if we get any other questions on the chat. Are you using any sort of specific music, or are you able to use music that the children themselves may know? I'm just sort of interested in the the choice of music that can engage them in what you're doing there.
Sure. Well, the music itself, it feels it needs to be very bespoke and individual to that child that we're working with at that point in time. So yes, they will be utilising those motivators, those particular songs that the child's really into, whether it be a TV show or a song they really like, or a character. And usually we'll bring those things into some sort of musical narrative within the session that can then help to motivate them to do certain things. So, for example, we had a young man who was really into space, and he was really into this particular space song that he had found on YouTube. And we were able to put together some resources having all the different planets of the solar system, and we had this song that we would sing through, and he would have to walk and find each of the planets and put them together in the order. So it's bringing together all of those motivators and putting that bespoke service.
And in terms of the research behind using, you were talking about with the child who is holding onto the parallel bars, using rhythm to help him learn where to step properly. What's the research behind the use of rhythm for sort of learning to re-walk again?
Sure. Now this is something that there's plenty of research in seeing people within a functional MRI scanner, for example, and they have they've had people listening to music and also playing music and using rhythm to really see what happens within the brain. And at that point, what you notice is that while the auditory cortex is firing, you will also see that there are the connections between the auditory cortex and the motor cortex. And that will help then just to fire the motor cortex in time with what's happening, what you're hearing. And that's called entrainment. And with that entrainment, we can help that child, or that individual, whoever, child, adult, to utilize that rhythm and to use that going forward in their movements. And we work quite closely then with the physios, thinking of what is that rhythm, how exactly are they stepping, where are they planting their feet, when are we trying to trigger those movements, and to really trying to work together on that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much both for your presentation. I'm going to move on to our second speakers. So let me just introduce Jacqueline Sharp, the service lead physiotherapist, and Emma Cooke, head of the physiotherapy service at Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, and welcome them to this webinar. And let me hand over to the both of you for your presentation.
Hi, we've also got Hugh Davis here as well, who's the lead for the Neuro Community Service.
We brought an extra one in today.
And what we've done actually, we've actually pre-recorded something, so we're going to play that, and then there'll be a chance to have questions at the end, hopefully. So Hugh's hopefully going to get it to work.
Is he gone?
No, I'm gonna do it now.
The Living Well programme was a result of a...
Bear with me a second, I'll just restart that.
The Living Well programme was a result of a successful funding bid to the Welsh Government to enhance our existing community neurological rehabilitation services. We did not secure all the funding we originally asked for, and a patient said to us early on that we would not change anything if we just carried on doing more of the same. Reflecting on this, scoping and stakeholder events were held, and a patient-centred step model of care was developed. The step model of care enables clients to access appropriate rehabilitation tiers according to their need, not their condition. It retains our highly specialist teams delivering services at level 3 and 4, and introduces programmes to support long-term condition management and well-being at levels 1 and 2. It recognises the benefit of group exercise in supporting clients with long-term conditions, and it promotes autonomy through shared decision-making and self-management. The second phase of the project then went on to develop the Level 1 and 2 Living Well programmes.
At the beginning of the pandemic, there was a focus to deploy and train staff at pace to support the acute service delivery across the Health Board, including the Dragon Heartfield Hospital. However, this did not mean that we shut community services, but we had to change how they were delivered. We worked with our Executive Director of Therapies and Healthcare Scientists to modify our rehabilitation model for COVID and continue to support people with neurological conditions through the lockdown and beyond.
In the lead up to lockdown and seeing the restrictions that were being put in place, we quickly realised that we would have to change the way we work in order to continue to provide for our client group. Our client group would be some of the most vulnerable people who were shielding. We also realised that this would be the case for some of our staff too. A leadership group was quickly set up of clinicians specialising in neurological rehabilitation. We put our heads together and came up with a plan on how we would keep our services running and provide support to the vulnerable in a time where they would have restricted movements and unable to attend face-to-face rehabilitation services. We would also need a plan for our staff. With little time wasted, we took a leap of faith, set out a bold and ambitious plan that would not only serve our clients in the short term, but would be something that we could utilise moving forwards in the future beyond lockdown. Our plan had a number of work streams. There was the digital online content, the expansion of our current existing community services to support discharge and admission prevention, the telephone consultation or virtual consultation group, and a work stream identifying how we were going to utilise our staff who were also shielding. It had always been a vision for our service to have developed a digital online content. However, the pandemic had really forced our hand, and now we needed to deliver. Early on, we realised how important it was going to be to increase the capacity within our early supported discharge service. We changed from a 5-day to a 7-day service to reduce the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. By focusing on rehabilitation in the community, we were able to help prevent admissions into hospital by providing a 7-day service that would not normally be available to some of our clients. They would normally require admission into hospital and assessment prior to accessing this service. We tried to keep our service proactive rather than reactive during this very difficult time. We came up with the idea of recording online content so that our patients could exercise at home and stay active during this time where they had restricted movement. We recorded a number of videos for people to use at home if they were either self-isolating or shielding in their own homes. These were recorded by some of our staff who were shielding themselves. They were able to use their time at home and produce these videos that we were then able to share with our clients. Alongside this, we would also produce some education sessions that could be viewed online on fatigue management and mindfulness.
So some of the things we've introduced are video consultations. So we contact patients initially by telephone, and then we offer them a video consultation if they want or if they need. And in that we discuss what matters to them, whether they've got any issues at the moment and how we can help them remotely. But we've also developed some resources online. We also realised that we had some staff that needed to work from home and shield, and so those staff came onto our team and we got them set up using some electronic remote working that we already had. We got them set up to do some video consultations at home, again sharing the work of the 5 teams between themselves really. And that way we were able to deliver a service to our patients rather than no service.
Hello, my name's Laura and I'm a physiotherapist working within Cardiff and Vale Health Board. On the 6th of April this year, I was working in the stroke rehab centre, preparing for the arrival of patients with COVID-19 and learning about how we can manage them from a respiratory point of view as well as rehab, when I was advised that I should return home and shield throughout the pandemic. I was absolutely gutted not to be on the front line helping my colleagues and anxious about how I could help and work over the next few months. Luckily, within less than 24 hours, I had the equipment to join an amazing team of therapists that were rapidly creating a virtual and online service for the most vulnerable neurology patients who we knew wouldn't be able to access the local services that we've run previously. I spent my first week learning how to edit and clip and create online exercise classes. I was able to immediately start using the new virtual platform to have video consultations with patients and be able to maintain that rapport and that patient contact, albeit virtually. For me, it's been an amazing experience to be able to still treat patients and see patients every day and know that the patients who maybe weren't going to have any input for a few months were straight away able to access resources online and hopefully give them the confidence to stay active and keep moving and prevent any deterioration. It's been a steep learning curve and one that I've really enjoyed.
The Trust have developed a website called keepingmewell.com, and on there there's a range of resources for patients to help themselves, and so we're doing a lot of signposting to those resources. And we're also doing a lot of signposting to other external resources, perhaps linked to the third sector. And you'll find quite a lot of those links on the keepingmewell.com website as well.
Alongside all of these online resources, we have also been running live classes. We have Parkinson's classes, We have Tai Chi classes and a class for seated exercise. These have been supporting our clients to be able to exercise at home. Most of our clients have reported that they've enjoyed exercising in the group environment online, although they do say that it's not as good as face-to-face. We've also been delivering online education sessions to support our clients at home. Whereas we would have normally done these in face-to-face sessions, we are now delivering it as an online resource.
The other stuff from lockdown.
Fantastic. They've helped me get back into a bit of a routine of exercising again, because I started off well and then I just lost the impetus. So this is giving it back, and it's been nice to see everything.
Or on any other format?
It's always nicer doing it face to face, so that you feel like you're more part of the group. When you're on Zoom, even though you can see everybody, you don't feel like you're together. Although it is nice to see other people, I wouldn't do it if it was just me by myself, though. So from that point of view.
Sway, do you think?
Sorry, the timing seems to have gone on the video there for some reason. I don't know why that's happened, but let me see if I can just fix that.
That's okay, Hugh. Maybe while you're looking to fix that, maybe I can just ask either Emma or Jackie a question, if that's okay. We can see on screen, so that's great. I was really impressed by the use of digital technologies, and I think it was Laura, the physiotherapist, said within 24 hours she had everything set up. That sounds to me like, you know, it's a possible new way of working that will continue after COVID. It's probably not going to go away, but after, you know, the emergency dies off. What are your thoughts about that moving forward?
I think we already wanted to do it, and I think COVID gave us the platform to do it, where some of the governance around getting things set up was a little bit lower. Equipment was available, and I think also we didn't have to persuade people that virtual might be a way of managing patients effectively. And I think just in that environment where people were just prepared to have a go, because that was really all that was going to be available for shielding patients, and the difficulty of bringing out, obviously, no outpatients into the hospital at that time. We've had this opportunity really to change our whole outpatients and community services virtually, and then we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. But what I think we all feel is that some people can be very effectively managed virtually. Some people might want a blended approach, but we are going to try and start all people virtually to have that initial conversation, because it's very timely, it's very convenient for people. We're not wasting people's time. They can just call in and then have discussions with them what matters to them and how they'd like to be managed. I think there's a slight challenge with it in that there are hard to reach groups that find virtual technology and platforms they might not have, and we have that in Cardiff. We've currently got a bid in with our health charities around support, because it's not so much about having the devices, it's having internet access, and things like Zoom calls, or using things like AccuRx or Attend Anywhere. They drain a lot of data, so we're looking at having preloaded things onto things that people could use on platforms, or even being able to buy dongles with data so that we can loan those out for patients, because it's good for most people, but there's a group. And what we didn't mention is we're doing quite a lot if people are being discharged, setting them up before they go, because certain patients find that very difficult, especially older patients. So they're set up before they go, they're confident with the technology before they go out, and that's helped. And it's then just now taking that into the sort of harder reach groups, really, that we're working on now with charitable bids.
And that side of it, as you said there, sort of helping people to get set up on technology before they've left your direct care is actually great for life. I mean, those are skills that, beyond their interactions with yourself and the Living Well program, it's going to be helpful and give them sort of agency around online, day-to-day use of online services.
Yeah. And it's great actually, because we can also phone in an interpreter very easily. So if we find someone that hasn't, isn't understanding us, you can actually arrange that straight away. Whereas that could be a missed appointment if they were coming in and we didn't have an interpreter available. So there's been some real positives around it all together.
Excellent. And can you finally say something about how your plans to sort of develop this program, through Cardiff, beyond Cardiff, into Wales, and possibly into other areas of the United Kingdom? It seems that you're able to sort of work and touch so many people through the program. How are that side of it going for you?
Well, we have, there's a neurological implementation group, which is all Wales group network, really. And we're certainly feeding back our project sort of findings and evaluation from that into that group. We've had a lot of interest from other health boards as to how our model runs. It's difficult to implement it directly into another area. I mean, much of what we've set up pre-COVID involved our local resources, what our assets were in our own community, but it's sort of just encouraging people to see what we've done and trying to see what they've got locally and what they can use. So it's not necessarily that you can sort of pick up our model and we're in a city. A lot of the rest of Wales is in more rural locations. We have access to numbers of leisure centres where we were pre-COVID running a lot of our programmes. So, but I think it's that whole idea of working in partnership with local organisations to really, work together to provide lifelong facilities and support for these clients.
And what we have shared nationally is things like we've got a governance structure about how we use virtual groups. Because we're currently using Zoom, and so that's all been shared nationally in Wales, with just so other groups can set that up, and we've got different therapists on those groups throughout Wales, so that learning can be shared out.
Fantastic. And hopefully the new sort of lockdown restrictions in Cardiff and Wales specifically aren't causing you too much extra difficulty. I can imagine that there's some sort of sense of, oh God, here we go again, but I guess you're much more set up now, which is fantastic. Thank you, Emma and Jackie and Hugh, very much for your contributions there. I'm going to move to our final shortlisting project and just introduce Alice Hardy, Neurologic music therapist, and Seána Sammin, speech and language therapist at the Wellington Hospital, again part of HCA Healthcare. So over to you, Alice and Seána.
Hi there. We seem to be having a bit of trouble with our camera, so I'm not sure if you can see us or if we've gone off.
We can certainly see.
Coming up for us.
We can certainly see it at the moment. Everything's fine.
Oh, okay, fine. It's just on this side. We can't see ourselves. All right, never mind then. Hi. Hi. So we have been running for probably a couple of years now. A sensory music group for our patients in disorders of consciousness. And we were going to tell you a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, so just I guess give you guys an overview, because not sure how many people are familiar with the population. But we have a mixture of patients here on our rehab unit and PDOC unit who are in various levels of consciousness. So from vegetative state where they wouldn't be interacting with their environment that much, to minimally conscious where they do start interacting with their environment and reacting to music or sounds or lights or things like that, and more of an awareness of self, and then on to people who are emerging from those disorders of consciousness, and then more able to engage in active rehab, I guess.
Yeah, so here we function as an assessment unit. So these patients come here to be assessed to find out their level of consciousness, and we then have the job of diagnosing them and optimizing their function so that they can interact with the environment and with family and friends to the best of their ability. So the hospital we are at is in London, and we started music therapy sessions for the group, which would last about 45 minutes once a week. The reason behind the music group was there weren't really many suitable groups for our PDOC patients to access to help a PDOC patient participate in activities. They require a lot of support, and it can be very difficult to manage in a group environment. And also, all of our patients are in single rooms, so we felt that this could tend to become quite socially isolated, especially when they have such trouble interacting with their environment. And there is relatively limited communal areas where we are. So the music group was to kind of counteract a lot of that, bring the patients together along with staff and the nursing or carers that were with them, and family were also invited to come as well. So yeah, the way the group worked is that we would have kind of welcoming greeting song where each patient was greeted individually, and this could have been we have a high popularity of Arabic patients here, so that song is sung in either Arabic or in English. And we then display a range of visual stimuli. We would choose a theme for the week, and we might show a picture of that. We're looking at whether these patients are looking at the picture, and we're handing out appropriate instruments for the patients to be supported to play. And then we are choosing songs based on a weekly theme, so there's kind of some cohesion to the group. And then we're also singing goodbye to everyone in English and in Arabic as well. So we noticed quite a lot of benefits to this group. So the input of sensory stimulation to these patients is really important. So there's quite a lot of very controlled stimulation that's being provided there. So you've got the auditory stimulation from the music, you've got the tactile stimulation from touching the instruments. The instruments are quite colourful, so they're really interesting to look at. And there's lots of people around, so our patients are quite interested in, when they're in a room on their own, they're actually quite interested in seeing other patients also in the hospital. So you can see them sort of looking over at each other, and because it was always the same patients every week, they almost got to know each other as well. So it was like a social activity as well.
Yeah, I guess a lot of what we're doing every single day with all of our patients here is observing. So we do a lot of observing and watching their behaviors and you know, keeping a track of any changes and things like that. And it is, you know, we're in the rooms with them every day, whether it's on our own or as part of the team, and we're presenting lots of different stimuli. And music is just quite different. And when you see the difference of music live versus like on the screen. So speaking of going to like COVID and all impacted it, and when you showed the same songs on the screen to them, there was some reaction, but it was a lot different to what we would have experienced when they were in that group setting, which really, I guess, showed to us the importance of having a group and having something, you know, where it was actual live music being played for them and then being able to interact. And it is a completely different thing that you're observing, and their awareness is completely different. And I guess in general, for most of our patients who attended the music group, we saw an increased responsiveness. So whether that was just that they were more alert and engaged in everything going on around them, or, you know, a lot of what we do is setting up tasks so that there's predictability and there's structure in these people's days, because obviously they don't always understand what's going on. So you kind of have to get them into a good routine so they can anticipate it. And then like that, going down into this room where it's the same group of people and they're given an instrument to play, and you know, you're assisting them to use that instrument while the song's being played. It's like a really nice routine for them to be in as well. And definitely, you know, saw different responses from everyone, of course, but also saw responses that lasted past the group. So, you know, in other sessions of the day, or just in general, then their anticipation, like when they heard like the bells coming or something, as Alice was walking in with her little trolley of instruments, but you know, things like that, like you really saw the difference that it made to them. And I guess really for us, what we're doing is we're trying to improve the quality of life of a lot of these patients, well, for every patient, because being in a disorder of consciousness, there's obviously very little that you're doing physically every day, and you want to provide an environment that's stimulating in the right way, so not overstimulating or anything like that, but you know, stimulating and so that they're getting enjoyment out of things as well. And music in general obviously is really important in that. And then I guess for the staff as well, quite nice to have like one session a week where we were all able to like get together and not just, you know, like I didn't personally treat at the time every single person in music group, but then it was really nice to observe the different behaviors that you were able to see and you know, then be able to talk about it with other staff about what you'd seen and like hand over, if they weren't in group that day, like hand over, oh, you should have seen him smiling today, or he picked up the instrument, you know. So it's just, it's good for team building as well, I think.
And I think another thing that I noticed that wasn't necessarily a goal when I set out with this project was actually the patient and staff interactions, especially between patients and their carers, and quite a lot of the time patients with their family members. So a lot of the time, you know, the nursing and the carer staff, they have so much to do. It's very complicated looking after these patients, and they've got a lot of things they have to do to keep our patients safe and to keep our patients healthy. And actually taking that time for the nurse to come down with the patient to bring them to music group, it was just really lovely seeing them just interacting with each other in a really appropriate and really nice way. And I think the nurses would often see responses in the patients that they wouldn't necessarily see when they're in bed and they're having their feed done or they're having their medication administered. They actually see that this person really is responding, and it made the nurses really happy, and they were so engaged and so motivated to interact with their patient in a really, really appropriate way. So I think it really improved the quality of the interaction between staff and the patient. And also when family members come, obviously it's a big shock for a family member to have their loved one in a disorder of consciousness. They don't really know, the way that they're interacting with their family member is so different now than it was before. And then what the music group sort of allowed was the family member to maybe observe other patients and other interactions going on, and that kind of modeled a way of interaction, a way of behaving with these people that's really appropriate. And they can say, oh, okay, that I see now how I can encourage my loved one to maybe do a bit more and to notice a bit more. And it was just a really nice way of, very low pressure way of demonstrating appropriate ways of interacting with these patients, which can be very complicated and really difficult to do.
Yeah, and keeping those bonds, as you're saying, like it's very hard when you have somebody who's not giving you any feedback at all, and especially when it's someone you love and know so well, and then to feel like you can't feed them, you know, you can't necessarily comfort them in any way, but music just kind of breaks through all of that and gives them that opportunity to share experiences in ways that they can't share other experiences anymore. And yeah, I think that's been really helpful for them.
Yeah. But obviously COVID has massively impacted the work that we're able to do. Just there's been restriction, all group activities at our hospital have been put on hold. There's been very restricted movement. You know, we used to use the big gym, but the patients are on a different floor. They can't access that gym now. And there's not enough space. There's not enough large spaces for patients to be able to congregate and socially distance at the same time. So we've been a little bit stumped. We've offered some virtual music therapy group where we've shown sort of recorded versions of the group to patients on an individual basis, which again, as Seána said, it is the main thing that works, I think, is the kind of the human contact and the human interaction. So it's a good stand-in, but I don't feel like it's necessarily a replacement.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because you weren't here, but when I got to play it for patients, it was really nice to just to see them, because they're really used to that. Again, when we talk about like the routine and the anticipation and stuff like that, they would start the session off with the hello song that they're very used to hearing, and then obviously having me have to substitute in their name and things like that. But you know, putting that as part of their routine and part of their session was like a familiar thing to them in a time when really everything changed, including like all their carers changed, like lots of things were changing in their lives, and then suddenly they weren't part of this group. When Alice then was able to give us this recording, and for a couple of our patients in particular, we were still getting those responses of the big smiles and things like that, and we didn't have the instruments to play with, unfortunately, which is often like a big thing that they enjoy. But yeah, definitely, I mean, you know, within the restrictions, it was at least some kind of way, because you can play collegiate music for them, or you know, English songs that they're very familiar with. But it is that little personal touch of like putting their names in the songs, or them knowing what's going to happen, which I think makes it different.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of live music is that you can really control the stimulation. So if it's too much, you have complete and total control over what you're playing, how loud you're playing it, how fast you're playing it, which you don't get with recorded music. So there is a big difference. But music therapy continues on an individual basis, so the patients are all getting seen. So for the time being, that's going to be how we continue. But we're hoping in the future that there's going to be a bit more movement. We can maybe take those patients to the bigger room, and maybe we'll do smaller music groups sort of twice a week with maybe just 3 or 4 patients instead of, I think we managed to have about 9 or 10 patients in the music group at one point. So things like that, we may just have to just slightly change the way we're working, but we're really hoping to get that up and running again. And if that's not possible, maybe the idea of a Zoom music group. A lot of our patients have phones and iPads that they use, and we're sort of toying with the idea of setting up a music group Zoom meeting and getting the carers or the nurses to help the patients log into that. So we're still sort of thinking of ways around it, really.
Thank you. I think you also demonstrate there what all 3 shortlisted projects have had to deal with is the resilience around dealing with COVID going forward, and how that you know, necessitates a change of approach and being able to think on your feet very quickly. So thank you very much to Alice and Seána from the Wellington Hospital there. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm only going to send you one question, if that's okay. You mentioned at the start of your presentation that you're working in an assessment unit for patients with disorders of consciousness. So would you ever use music as a sort of a treatment modality outside of the assessment unit, or is this something that's just specific to the work that you're doing as an assessment?
So the music therapy is also for our rehabilitation unit as well. So we have our PDOC unit, but we also have our rehab unit as well. So we use it with a really wide range of patients. But with the PDOC, we have the music group, but we also use the MATADOC, which is the music assessment tool for awareness in disorders of consciousness. So pretty much all of the patients that will be in the group will have gone through the music assessment, which can give a diagnosis of vegetative state, minimally conscious or emerging, and then they're kind of streamlined into the group for monitoring. That way I can kind of keep an eye on the patients and see if I can notice any responses and alert the team if I think actually this person needs reassessment, which has happened with several patients. We've noticed more responsiveness in the music group, which has then led to the team actually reassessing and coming up with a new diagnosis for that patient.
Great, thank you very much to you both. So I'm just going to bring the session to an end, but let me just formally thank Jonathan Fever and Mark Inhofer at the Portman Hospital, Emma Cooke and Jackie Sharp and Hugh Davis over at Cardiff and Vale, and then finally Alice Hardy and Seána Sammin at the Wellington Hospital. I think my sense of it, and I hope with those of you watching this webinar, also share the fact that I've been really impressed by the quality of the shortlisted projects, and also the number of people, especially with the project at Cardiff and Vale, the number of people that project and all of our projects have been able to touch, both in terms of patients, but the collaboration between AHPs and other nursing and healthcare staff. I think that's absolutely how healthcare needs to be delivered in the 21st century. It's a series of collaborations for patient benefits, and I was really impressed on all our shortlisted projects about how you demonstrated that. And I think finally my heart goes out to you all around the resilience that you've shown around COVID, being able to bounce back as you know we all have as a nation going forward. So thank you for demonstrating that, and also for really showcasing the projects that you've been shortlisted for at the Chroma Award for Excellence in Neurorehabilitation, that's in association with IMPA, the Independent Neuro Rehab Providers Alliance. And finally, if you want to find out which one of these projects is our winner, then please join us on Friday, the 16th of October, that's next Friday, where the results will be announced and there'll be all the hoopla of the online awards ceremony. So thank you very much to all of our 3 shortlisted projects, and leave it for me to say goodbye to you all. Cheerio.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for your chairing the webinar and your brilliant summing up and support of this important award. And thank you once again to Jonathan, Mark, Jackie, Emma, Hugh, Alice and Seána for all your presentations, which are clearly 3 important projects which are highly transferable. So I'm sure you'll all be in great demand to share your work in the coming months from various sources. This webinar is part of a series featuring many of the finalists from this year's Advancing Healthcare Awards. The last webinar in the series is next Wednesday, the 14th of October, when we'll hear from the finalists in the Welsh Government Award for Prudent Healthcare. Remember, you can still book your place at the awards ceremony for next Friday afternoon on the 16th of October. Details on our website, and please tell your colleagues to register as well. And as usual, a big thank you to our in-house team, Rachel, Joy, Ellie, who've worked so hard to make these things happen organisationally and technically. And finally, this webinar will be available on our website together with the others in the series, and details in the chat or on the website. So please share with those who weren't able to join us today. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day.